All right. good good morning. Good morning, guys. Um, something that has always troubled me with contemporary culture is this phenomena of gaslighting. Now, let's let's think about what gaslighting is in in our contemporary culture. Like, what is gaslighting? What is being said with this word? What is being said with this word gaslighting? Um, it seems like the connotation behind gaslighting is that the other person that is gaslighting you is saying something to distract you from like the reality of an interaction. They're essentially blocking. They are purposely deceiving you in in trying to show that either it is really your fault or or something else. And I've always struggled with this word, especially when it's said, because the word is such a it carries a lot of baggage now, and it carries a lot of ammo too, because the word, you know, becomes this, right? In a statement, it becomes, "Oh, you're gaslighting me," right? And when somebody says these words to another person, like, "Oh, you're gaslighting me," this gaslighting can't help but be we struggle knowing what this is. In virtue of itself, we struggle knowing what this is because there's a couple questions that I have to ask, right? When this phenomena is happening, is it us trying to protect an ego ideal, or is it that somebody is actually trying to deceive you on a interpretation of an interaction? Because fundamentally that's what gaslighting is that somebody's trying to deceive you about an interpretation of of an event or of an action, right? But the thing is that this is so problematic because I feel like it's very hard to um, pin down, and what makes the conversation very difficult concerning this topic is that, well, we are convinced, like, we're convinced that what is being said is used as a tool to deceive us and prevent our knowledge about the situation. And so this is why I struggle with this term gaslighting, because I can definitely see how even a person, like, what's hard about this term is that you can gaslight somebody by saying they're gaslighting. That's why it's like, for me, it's almost like a pointless thing to say, because you can say that actually you're gaslighting by saying they're gaslighting too. And what makes situations even more complex, especially with human interactions, is that you are assuming the intentions of the other person. Like, you are interpreting their intentions. And so, by virtue of interpreting their intentions, you interpret them as malicious. And this is, again, very difficult to like pin down because we're fundamentally trying to interpret something that we cannot see. We cannot really know the interpretation. We can be confident that this may be what it is, but it's always difficult um, to have this conversation. And so there is a lot, there. Gaslighting entirely as a phenomenon, it's for me it's problematic because if we don't understand how thinking functions, meaning like the very fact that thinking has a way of assimilating things rather quickly. um, I think when gaslighting first came out as a phenomenon, it exposed something real. But the more that we hinge upon this word, the more that we root ourselves in this word, you can see it instantly becomes uh, abusive too. Like it has an abusive element now because it's in the hands of all. Basically, what's funny about this interaction is that if there really is people that supposedly gaslight you, the most gaslight thing to do would be to say that, oh, you're gaslighting, right? So you can see how already we have weaponized the invisible enemy. And the invisible enemy is, kind of laughing at this irony. And that's what makes it difficult with uh, exposing this kind of actions because, again, we're talking about interpretation, and it's really difficult. So that's why I don't even like, there's these certain psychologists that I follow, and they always break down like these phrases that gaslighters will say. But it's funny. What's funny about that is if if a man really wanted to gaslight, then he would be like, okay, so then I just won't say those statements. I'll say something else. I'll say you're gaslighting me instead. Um, and there's something so ironic about that, and there is something so problematic about the human experience where it's like, how do you deal with this tension of you feel like somebody is doing something maliciously but in secret, right? Because that's the exposure of gaslighting, basically. um, that you're trying to expose them for doing something maliciously but in a very kind of like deceptive way. you know it may come off like they are caring about you, it may come off like um, they do love you, but again, we must not forget that when we interpret these actions, we're also equally involved, and that's why I really do struggle, and I try to refrain from accusatory kind of statements because there is a situation in which both can be true. Like this person can be gaslighting, but you also can be gaslighting. We for some reason we have fooled ourselves into thinking that it is only one-sided, that this gaslighting is only one-sided. But what's funny about the human being is that immediately gaslighting becomes hard to discern when you don't know if you are actually trying to defend an action that you did or you're trying to defend an ego ideal. And if you're trying to defend an ego ideal, then there is a kind of way in which you're gaslighting yourself by accusing the other person of gaslighting. So I think it's always possible that, and I'm always reminded of Carl Jung when he talks about the shadow. It's very possible that the person is a bad person, but then also you have those elements too, to which you are also projecting. Like I always like that kind of play where it's like we only entertain like this either or, and then uh, it we find it inconceivable that it could be both. That the person that you're complaining about is is that way, but then you're also that way. And I feel like we don't talk about this bothness as often, and I feel like that's what's problematic about this term gaslighting, is because fundamentally we always assume a one-sided interaction, and that's why we call it gaslighting. We're like, well, this person is saying this about me. This person is, he interpreted my actions as such, but that was not true, and he's trying to feed it into my mind that my actions were as such. um, but again, like I said, what's difficult about these conversations is that the person that is defending themselves, you cannot determine whether they are honestly defending themselves or they are defending an ego ideal that they are unaware of. And it's this unawareness that also makes it problematic, because it's possible that, like you said, that somebody is gaslighting you, but it's also possible that they don't interpret it as such, that they actually believe it is a genuine interaction, that they're not trying to purposely deceive you. And I've encountered this in many points of my life, where it's like, the more you talk to the person, you start realizing, like, oh my God, they are completely unaware. They have no idea what they're doing. But then there is this other haunting thing where you realize that maybe you don't even know what you're doing. And that's why I find this conversation just problematic, and it's just difficult. I don't have an answer. There, for me, there is no answer to this, but I do think that this is a problem that we have to, like, really, really think through, like, understanding what that structure is for gaslighting, because um, fundamentally it does seem that it is very concerned about being deceived or being manipulated into deceiving oneself, right? If I were to give the overall definition of gaslighting, is that it is this kind of manipulative interpretation deceives that deceives the receiver of that information. And it's this very deception that we are accusing the other person of. Like, you are deceiving me of my own self by saying I am such and such a way, right? But like I said before, how can we really say that this is a deception? Because what are you defending? That's the question that I always like to bring into investigation, is like, what is being defended in this scenario? What is being defended? Because if what is being defended is your secret protection for your ego ideal, then I think that is not a deception at all. That would probably be an untethering, a revealing of something. But again, what's so difficult about this is that you can use the term gaslighting as a defense against your own egos, and how the gaslighter can also gaslight himself by using gaslighting as a term to blame people and attack other people, and not take genuine responsibility either. Uh, so I think we have to at least be mindful of those traps, and think of the danger in those statements, because you know I just see it too often and too many times to um, really count. And I think sometimes even the accusation of gaslighting is just like a non-starter for some people. Like, it's hard to get past, or it's hard to have a conversation once a person has accused the other of gaslighting, because it's like you're just set you are set on the fact that the person is purposely trying to deceive your intentions, or trying to twist your words or your intentions or something, and yet we do it to ourselves. right? Like for some reason, we have not really pondered about how we do it to ourselves. And so, what my question is going to end with: how do we determine that difference? How do we really honestly determine that difference when we feel maybe that there is some type of gaslighting going on? And I think there may be, I think this may be a question of locality, because it's very possible that, yeah, there's the gaslighting going on, but who is doing the gaslighting? Is it the man gaslighting himself in very accusation of saying that somebody is gaslighting him? Or is that person actually genuinely twisting his words into a kind of deception of himself? But I feel like the root of the problem kind of comes down to identity. I want to protect my identity. And we don't like any negative connotations thrown on our identity. And even if it's not true, right? This is the part that I want to get at. Even if it's not true that you are in such and such a way, we have a hard time accepting um, someone accusing of someone accusing us of that. We have a hard time accepting, like, we want to, this is the trap, like we want to affirm to them our image, like, no, that's not true, I didn't do that, I didn't think that, and so on. Of course, what I'm saying is close to, I mean, most people wouldn't be able to do it, and I myself struggle with uh, not doing it, because sometimes um, it's a very bothersome feeling to take an accusation, something you didn't do really, and just let that be the perception. Just let that be the perception. But I feel like that very struggle is us having, like, I feel like once you start practicing that kind of thing, you can see how much we hold a picture of ourselves every time we're talking to somebody. That's the difficult part, you know. So that is like the fundamental, I feel like, difference in that. But anyways, I just want to make this short. So, all right, guys, take care.